Hi viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're kind of revisiting a topic that we have talked about somewhat in the past, which is witches and witchcraft in the media. But this time the question was posed a little bit more in depth. I will put the question in the description because I don't have it to read word for word. The question was specifically what kind of effects on our daily life come from media portrayals of witches and witchcraft, and even more specifically in relation to the way that children perceive us based on the things that they see. So how does that affect our daily life? And I should say right now that I did talk to Eric yesterday, and since he doesn't really use the term witch for his practice, I have told him to go ahead and talk about the media representations of his path that exist, and I will extend that same freedom to the rest of the members of the channel. So you're hearing about witches and witchcraft from me because that's how I identify, but that may not necessarily be the case all week, which should be fun. So first of all, I grew up watching some media representations of witches, and now I identify as one, so clearly I was not totally repulsed by it or given a really weird perception of it. A lot of media portrayals actually make witches look really cool, like way cooler than we are, because they have special effects and we have reality. Other portrayals are kind of negative, but some of those are still just really funny, so it's kind of forgivable, and others are just so clearly not real, at least to me, that I don't think anyone would actually ever think that that's what real witches are. But I could be wrong because there are some silly people out there. Mostly media representations affect me by becoming something that I can reference. People will ask me about something and I can say, well, did you see such and such movie? Yeah, it's kinda like that, only slightly different in reality. Or I can say, well, did you see that? It's exactly like that. They got that right on the nose. Or, yeah, it's nothing at all like that. So I use movies and TV shows that I've seen that other people may have seen to explain different things, and that seems to work pretty well most of the time. So I have a list here. I looked up witches in TV and witches in movies to see what kinds of things come up on lists online. So I have a list here. I've separated it into TV shows and movies, and keep in mind that anytime I say real, I am using the word real loosely. When I say real magic throughout this, just know that I mean it loosely. So first we have TV shows. We have Disney and Looney Tunes witches, Witch Hazel and Magica Dispel. All of the Disney TV show cartoon witches are kind of all humorous and generally bad witches, or they want to do bad things to people that fail in really funny ways. Bewitched teaches us that witches are gorgeous and make mistakes, just like the mortals that they marry. Other witches in the family are helpful or antagonists, but they're all still really funny. And it's a lot about life issues just added on top of that. But what if you were also a witch? Sabrina the Teenage Witch is similar in that regard, because it's all like, oh man, being a teenager is so difficult, and on top of that you come from a magic family. It's clearly not real magic. There's that real, but it's always entertaining. I loved that show with Melissa Joan Hart, and it's a family tradition, so her aunts are involved, and Salem the cat also. Sabrina the animated series, loved it, loved it. Very similar to the live action in the way that it tells stories, but it's a lot freer with the special effects because it is animated. Oh, also Gem. Charmed shows us another family tradition, again with the gorgeous witches, and again with the sisters and the grandmothers and the women. Again, clearly not real magic, but it does have a lot of elements of reality that I think we can draw on, and I do often reference Charmed as like, it's kind of like that, but moments. Twitches, or I always read it as T-Witches, but it's Twitches. It's a book series. I read a couple of the books, and then Disney made movies of it with Tia and Tamara Mowry. It's the typical duality. They're two sisters, they're representing light and dark, and they represent the two sides, and they come together to create balance, and it's like good fighting evil and all this stuff. But it's fun stuff, and again, it's not really real magic because, yay, special effects. Buffy is a show that I have not watched as much. I watched Charmed all the time, I never watched Buffy, and now I have only seen a couple episodes that my roommate showed me when I was doing research, actually, so I could know more about Willow. But so basically we've got Amy, Willow, and Tara. I don't know much about them, but I do know that Willow goes through a lot of changes throughout the show based on the experiences that are happening to her, and her magic and her persona, her characterization changes throughout that, which I think really lends itself to the idea that magic is magic and a witch is a witch, but it depends on the way a witch uses magic, what the result is. So I think she is a really good example. True Blood has some elements that we can draw on for explanation and some that we can argue about, definitely. They're pretty stereotypical witches. Holly mentions that she's a Wiccan and then talks about herbal remedies for stuff. Marnie, first of all, her name is Marnie, and that'll come up again later. I don't even really know how to describe Marnie, except that I explain her the same way I explain Nancy, which I'll get to later in the movie section, but she goes crazy with power, which is kind of understandable. So I think that the crazy out there things that True Blood does are explainable within the context of the show. Not in the real world, but within the storyline they've got going, it makes perfect sense to me. I put this under TV shows even though I saw it as like a really long movie version, but technically it was a miniseries. Tin Man, have you guys seen it? As Cordelia. Love her. Love her. She's supposed to be like the Wicked Witch of the West, so if you think about Wicked, which I will get to later, and then look at As Cordelia, it's definitely still that misunderstood bad girl who we can kind of still really love. At least I do. When I looked up witches from TV shows online, it came up with Alex from Wizards of Waverly Place, and it didn't mention the other members of her family that also practice magic, but they do. She has brothers, so it's not just Alex. Still, it's another fun Disney show about a family who has family problems, but they're also magical. And their magic powers have been given to them through a long, long line of special effects artists. Some other TV shows that were mentioned, and they talked about the different witch characters I've never heard of, like The Secret Circle? What is that? I've never even heard of that. I've heard of Vampire Diaries, but I haven't seen it. I had never heard of The Worst Witch, but now Patrick's username makes so much more sense to me. And then there's Witchy Poo from HR Pufnstuf, which I also never watched, but one of my ex-boyfriends told me about, so I knew that she existed. Apparently she's really creepy. And there are many, many more TV representations of witches, I'm sure, but we're going to move on to the movies now. Again, starting with Disney, there are tons of Disney movie witches, especially if you use the word witch loosely as well. Anything from Snow White's sorceress stepmother to the really cute witch in Brave, Ursula and Maleficent to the sorcerer whose name I can't remember, and Mama Odie in The Princess and the Frog, and everything in between there. There's tons of witches. Also, on this particular list that I found on Disney Wiki, they include Dr. Ann Possible, Kim Possible's mother, as a fictional female character who practices craft. There's Narnia's White Witch, who could be interpreted as a negative representation. She's obviously quite a bit frigid, and we really see nothing but the cold shoulder from her. There's Tia Dalma in Pirates of the Caribbean, who is pretty cool. Of course, there's the craft, which I love and is very useful for explanation. There are some elements of reality in that movie that are obviously changed for media effect, but it's still fun, and it does have a real lesson. Don't abuse your powers. In Practical Magic, we see another family tradition, and they deal with a whole lot of crazy, crazy things. There are also some elements of truth in the movie, though, so I also do refer to that for explanation a lot, also because I love that movie. The Mists of Avalon I actually watched on YouTube, and that is a more historical point of view, so I'm definitely able to make a lot of connections with that representation of the priestesses and the goddess worship and all that kind of thing. And it's definitely portrayed in a very serious, reverent manner of, like, this is an actual thing. Definitely when you look at the other things that are so much for humor and like, oh hey, let's laugh at the witches doing crazy things, this is much more like, this is this reality in this world. Harry Potter. Again, not real magic, but a lot of real lessons. And a lot of magic that we would all really love to be able to do. I mean, come on, let's get serious. In the Blair Witch Project, you don't even ever meet the witch. It's just all about the crazy fear that's going on surrounding the idea of the witch, so probably could be considered a negative representation. The Witches? Creepy. creepy witches. Holy, yeah, creepy. Hocus Pocus. Also kind of creepy, but really hilarious and fun. Plus, they don't want to eat children, they just want to suck the youth out of them, which is like, obviously they didn't exaggerate that for media at all, because we all do that. I mean, how do you think I end up looking so young all the time? You should have seen me a century ago. Halloween Town, and this is where the Marnie thing comes back in, because the girl in Halloween Town, her name is Marnie. It has several sequels, but throughout it's all good versus evil, and it's really fun, and it has an awesome grandmother character, Aggie Cromwell, for the win. Teen Witch is an old movie that I forgot that I had seen. I found it on this website and there was a trailer and I was like, I've seen this! It's fun, again, and it kind of has a takeaway lesson because it's all about like, yes, you could do anything you wanted with your powers, but you probably shouldn't because it's not always good to do that. The Wizard of Oz and Wicked, both fun. Wicked is a little bit more serious portrayal, in-depth relationships of the characters, looking at their actual personalities. But The Wizard of Oz is definitely a big, well-known representation of witches, and so that's where the whole are you a good witch or a bad witch thing comes from, which is just like, and I mean, clearly I appreciate it because I have these magnets on my mini fridge, and someone gave me this bookmark that says only bad witches are ugly, and this hangs on the wall in my bedroom because I played Dorothy in a theater production of The Wizard of Oz my senior year of high school. I also own 2 different pairs of ruby slippers, one that I used for the play and one that I bought later on when they made them and sold them at Walmart. There's a picture of me with my ruby slippers in a wheelchair, and that is when someone told me who Nessa Rose was, because that's before I had seen Wicked, and I still haven't read it. So I mean, you'll hear me argue the good witch, bad witch thing in reality all the time, but I definitely appreciate the reference and where it comes from. The Covenant is a movie that I saw not even knowing that it was about witchcraft. I think I thought it was about vampires, but anyway, it's about boy witches. Again, it's with the family lines. A lot of these movies are about, like, they come from long lines of bullshit. So that does affect us quite a bit, I'm sure. There are also 3 other, I know they're big movies that I haven't seen yet, which are The Witches of Eastwick, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and Bell Book and Candle. I haven't seen those, but I know they're pretty popular representations. This video's way too long, I apologize. So like I said, the emphasis on witches who are from long lines of witches, therefore having more power, is definitely a big effect on our community, and that's something that we can definitely debate. And so is the fact that most of these witches in these portrayals are girls, and their grandmothers, and their aunts, and it's very much female, whereas we know that there are male practitioners. So I think that is a huge effect, because that's just kind of, people get used to the idea of witches being female, and then they're like, what, you're a male witch? Huh? So I know people struggle with that. But I really think, personally, what I've gotten, since I'm not male, I'm sure that might be more so, but since I'm not, the biggest effect that I've gotten from stuff like this is the special effects. By that, I mean what people think I can do. 'Cause yeah, some of the witches are scary or weird or want to do bad things to people and or children and or animals. So that could really affect the way that children and other people see us as like, oh, they're all bad, they want to do bad things. But the thing that I get most is people saying things like, oh, you're a witch, so you think that you can fly around on a broom, and you think you can wave a wand and make stuff happen like Harry Potter, and you think you can freeze time with your hands, and that's what I get. But for me, those things are pretty easy to explain away, like, no, that's television. This is the real world, last time I checked. Again, real, loosely. With kids in particular, I really think that it's good that there are some elements of reality in some of these things that we can explain, because we can say things like, yes, some witches do use a Book of Shadows, but it's not exactly like the Hollowell sisters' Book of Shadows. Instead, we put things like this in it. Or yes, we do call the elements into our circle when we perform a ritual, but there's not going to be lightning and thunder and the butterfly's jar breaking open and nobody's going to be walking on water, sorry. Or another The Craft reference. Glamour is a thing, but it doesn't exactly work the way that it does with special effects. So I don't know, I take the effects that media representations have and I use them to my advantage, and I use them to explain to people and help educate people about what is real and what was exaggerated for TV or movies. What things might be straight from reality, what things are taken from reality and just changed a little bit to make it more fun for the media, and what things are just totally made up and not at all based in reality. So that's what I do with the effects of media, and that's what I encourage other people to do. Because, I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to embrace some of these arguably completely wrong representations of witches without having to say, this is exactly what witches are like, because we know they're not. But that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy any of these things, because I definitely do enjoy most of these things. Not gonna lie to you, and I'm not gonna be upset about it. So thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry this was so long, but I'm the one that has to sit there and edit this now, so really the joke's on me. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you guys next week, and until then, blessed be, and goodbye.